Thanks. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and I'm really excited to add to the collection of work tonight and also play some games, because sometimes we sit around too much and talk, and it's nice to actually do that while we're playing as well. So tonight I wanted to just talk about gaming space and social intervention. I am going to show some work from my lab, some of my own work, and a few projects by other artists that I'm interested in and I've been writing about recently. And I think it's interesting to compare these kinds of projects that are dealing with social or political issues, because they do so in very interesting ways and do so by very different development methodologies. One of the things I'm very interested in is the methodology for developing different kinds of games, and do the way that we make activist games, does it have to be different because of the different kinds of questions that we are asking? So that's one of the fundamental things that I think about a lot. One of the things I think it's interesting about, I've been doing a lot of art historical research on other artists using games. I have a book coming out soon from MIT Press called Critical Play. And Critical Play is about artists using games in their artwork since most of the 20th century. Several artists have been doing this, especially surrealists, Dada artists, Fluxus artists, etc. And I'm interested to see how we're using, as activists and artists, how we're using the medium of a game to render the surface of the world palpable and render it marvelous. And I think that's one of the reasons that we want to have such physically engaged, embodied experiences in our play, because we're so used to being mediated. It's really nice to actually be very present, very live, and in a marvelous place with a game. So I feel like the concerns of the surrealists with their new medium of photography were really very similar kinds of things are happening right now for artists and for activists. Here's an example. I mean, Katamari was mentioned earlier by our editors of the book, and of course, I'm thinking a lot about issues of here's consumption 30 years ago, and here's consumption now, in terms of what happens in a game, Katamari Damashi. And when I think about games becoming marvelous or games engaging the viewer, if you've ever seen this commercial by PlayStation, wait, I lost my audio here. There we go. I'm just going to play that again because it's really a fetish item, actually. Let me do that again.
吉田様、社長室へ。
あ、はい。失礼します。
転がして巻き込んで大きくする塊魂。
プレイステーション。
And this, I'm going to follow this up with an American version of the commercial, using Katamari, but in a different, for a different product.
When your insurance is in sync, you can roll with anything, travelers.
So an insurance commercial with Katamari, it just shows you how infiltrated in everyday life so many of the game paradigms and game examples are. Those aren't activist examples. In fact, I would say that maybe they're the opposite, but they're pleasurable and interesting. So what are some activist examples of the kinds of things that we want to do? Well, first of all, I think I'd like to just remind us that any game is a device for producing a subject position or a subjectivity. And because of that, we can look at different kinds of games and examine them from that point of view. So I want to show several projects. One is called youarenothere.org. Then I'm going to follow up with domestic tensions. And then the last two are from myself and my lab. So the first two are from One is a New York group, and one is a Iraqi-American artist, and then 2 from my lab. So first, youarenothere.org. Youarenothere.org is a locative media project which is really done in a very low-tech way. Basically, a map of Baghdad with historic and very important events and places, especially key to the U.S. invasion of Iraq and especially Baghdad, are marked on a map of Baghdad. And so you can see there's different locations here that were very important for U.S. military goals. And then on the back of the map, you print a map of Manhattan and Brooklyn, New York City. And so what happens is you print it two-sided, and then you hold up the map to the light and go to different locations in the New York metropolitan area that correspond to the Baghdad area, and you make a phone call. There are street citations here where you get a certain number that you're supposed to call, and it gives you a critical commentary on what happened at that site and what happened, and I think there are actual different recordings, so if you play it twice, you may get different responses. And it's a way to have this question of embodiment, to have people physically going through and experiencing the scale of Baghdad for people who have never been there, for people to understand some of the things that are not talked about in the United States as far as the kinds of things that the government and the people of the United States are actually doing in the city of Baghdad and have been doing. So here are a group of participants. This started at a group called the Conflux event. We have a psychogeography festival every year in New York, and this is a good place to have this. This group has actually started making other comparative cities. They just did Gaza and Tel Aviv double maps, and so they're going around the world and trying to look at places where there are conflicts and map those places together in some kind of dialogue, and doing it in different languages as well, so that you have a sense of people coming together and using this material. I think that this project really shows you this idea about using the body as some other kind of like educational medium in a way. I mean, it's not just, at this point when you're going with a group of people, you can actually have a dialogue about political issues, and you're not just playing a simple game, but you're rather working together and actually having a political dialogue the whole time. Games to me are not only these rule-based systems, but they're affective systems. That is, they have us feeling things, and they're also these relational systems. They set up relationships between players, and they set up relationships between players in space, between players and other people, and between architectures, human bodies, and other kinds of physical manifestations of these things. And I want to talk next about a project called Domestic Tension. This is a pretty interesting project. Some of you may have heard of this. This took place in May of 2007, and Wafa Bilal is an Iraqi-born American citizen who decided to make a gallery show in Chicago where he would put himself into a gallery space and really reflect on the urban condition of people living in Baghdad right now. Because, as you probably know, many people in Baghdad are kind of suffering under a kind of house confinement. And the experience of urban space has now become extraordinarily limited because it's so dangerous, cordoned off, and completely these strange geographies set up. So he decided that the space of an urban exploration of Baghdad would be the space of an interior. And the space of confinement. So he set himself up, and he did a few other things too. He decided that you could shoot the Iraqi by hooking up an internet connection to his gallery space and hooking up a paintball gun so that viewers on the website could decide to take pot shots at him whenever they'd like. So any time of the day or night, he's in this confined space, and he's being shot at. He started wearing goggles and then a helmet because he was getting bruised and hitting in the head. And day and night, you know, he'd be sleeping, and people would be shooting him and shooting him and shooting him. And what's really disturbing is actually reading the websites about what people talk about, the discourse around this project. There are so many people who are like, do I get a reward for how many times I hit him, or do I? It was really used, you know, really the rhetoric of gameplay and of the traditional way of winning a game wasn't really questioned by most of the visitors to this site, which I thought was fascinating. Like, how could you not just wonder about the situation? Like, no one, but what's interesting is that there did end up being an activist group, players who would come and intervene. And so people would fight to get on to the paintball gun and try to shoot away from him and have a conversation with him. He had chat set up so you could chat with him. And people were saying, look, we're gonna shoot at the plant now. You'll be safe for another 10 minutes if we can keep this up. And so there was a kind of group trying to save him in the middle of this space. He was there for a month. And he, I guess, didn't suffer any long-term damage physically to his body. But if you look at the kind of commentary from people, many people thought it was, visitors thought it was not a political statement at all. I think people in the art world may see it differently, and that's a question for all of you to consider. Some people were saying, wow, the guy looks really scared when he's running around. But the most ironic thing is that he had to actually leave Iraq due to his prior artwork, because he was a citizen. He's an American citizen now, but born in Iraq, and he had started his art career making artworks in Iraq and was driven out. This is incredibly interesting because of the next project he did, and even though I'm not going to spend much time on it, I want to mention it. But just so you know, 60,000 paintballs were shot at him in the course of a month. I don't know how many paintballs are made actually per year, but apparently a lot. They're available. He starts to look really bad. And can you imagine the environment? I just think it's a pretty intense thing. I'm kind of into Borries, and he would probably think that's a bad idea because I don't know if he'd appreciate being adopted by the game studies community. But he's a theorist who really looks at relationships between people in art events and what kind of live events can do to generate interesting participatory content, and not our user-generated variety, but our actual participant-led experiences. One of the projects that he just, that Wafa Bilal just tried to do was a computer game called Virtual Jihadi. He was a visiting artist at a school in New York, in upstate New York. He was commissioned to stay there and make an artwork. He made a computer game as an Al-Qaeda operative in the game. And he tried to have the exhibition, and the university would not show it. They moved it to an off-site place. This was just a few months ago. They moved it to an off-site place in the town, and the place was closed due to fire hazards or something like this. And there were big protests, and his work is now closed. And of course, this is the same kind of artist who is removed from Iraq due to his political stuff, and then he can't have freedom of expression in the United States. So this is all a pretty interesting artist to watch as far as the kinds of way he's going to be engaging with political work and with the spaces that create that. One of my students in my lab, I have a social impact game lab, and we do games and other kinds of social networking technologies and educational games, a lot of things about gender, teaching girls to program, lots of I have some games for obesity and different kinds of health games, but I'm always trying to look at the various kinds of ways that we assume certain things about games, winning, losing, you know, why does this constitute winning, what is the game, how are we rewarded in a game? And my student decided to make an ARG game with a headset display called Stand Up, Don't Fall. And it's a pretty experimental piece using the headset technology and your little icons that bring up scenes. He wanted to make a piece about Abu Ghraib. So he made a mixed reality system trying to bring the images of the torture by US soldiers during the Iraq War to people's everyday lives. And so this is kind of a super controversial thing to do, but I think it was really important to at least try, although, of course, with the headset on, that's always a strange. The interface question has been brought up several times in our artist discussion here. It's always something to grapple with. But he really wanted to use the high-end media technology itself to do an activist project because that's the same kind of technology that would be used by the military as well. So he created a virtual city as a display, and then tagged the experience with the icons. And I'll show you a video of what it kind of is like. He made there are two actors. One is a mystical donkey, and one is an authority figure. It's actually the artist and his twin brother who are standing there in costume. Let's see. I don't know if we have audio in here. I think it's okay with that audio. It's probably dance music.
And you turn the turret with these two buttons. That one and that one. And this one, I believe, fires the main armament.
So you're actually seeing through a camera on this tank, and you're experiencing the world through the eyes of this tank, through this military machine, even though it is a toy, and everything's to scale to the tank size. So the small little video image you saw of us marching soldiers and things, those are the kinds of things that show up in your peripheral vision. He also had photographic documentation of the event, so some of it was a virtual kind of intervention in your face, and some of them are actual photographs from that event. But he was really interested in trying to confuse that relationship between audience, victim, and authority figure, and then what role the media plays in surveying all of those kinds of things. I don't know, I find that the most interesting political work sometimes is the work that is confusing. That doesn't necessarily make me think, it's not dogmatic in one way or another, it's more provoking kinds of questions. As Salvador Dali had Confucianism as a methodology, I think that things that make you puzzle over different kinds of intention, have a dialogue, seems to be really powerful. So the last project I want to talk about is something very different. This is one of my works. It's this giant joystick piece that's been running around. It was in Europe for quite a while, and then it moved to California. It's a large, joystick, and it. One of the things that I was trying to do with a piece like this is to get groups of people collaborating who would not normally collaborate, and I was afraid to try something too political without testing out my theories about collaboration. Just by changing the scale of a joystick, you're able to shift people into a very childlike state. People, adults would climb up right on this joystick and play, and you have to, the scale is so large that you have to play with another person. So it's an object that can actually serve as this talisman for like a social sculpture in a way. If you think about Joseph Borries' idea of social sculptures as these created, molded social groups, I think that this work works in that way, but on a very abstract level about collaboration. It seems that in our country, which is really divided in terms of your left wing and your right wing, Overly political work seems to attract the same audience one way or another, if it's depending. And so I think working in the middle ground in something that's kind of more bringing up ideas of nostalgia may be a strategy for that kind of work. Here's some images of the work with groups of people on the joystick. And then this is just another set of projects I've been doing out in the streets with doing map scotches. They're kind of little psychogeography hopscotch projects that I have little fluxus cards and hand out to people as they wander by. People doing kind of more, these are more political, although not always, depends on the card you draw, of things like make a hopscotch where you can survive on $27 of food. So you have to do food, like it's like a food shopping hopscotch, trying to reflect on the fact that in New York City, you have to live on $27 of food a week if you are on public assistance. So $27, if you've ever been to New York, doesn't get very far. And so just bringing that to life by play, bringing political issues and social issues to life through a physical engagement. And so I've been thinking about this in terms of this idea that I've been thinking about embodied design, somehow bringing an embodied experience to the play, the play of political kinds of issues, or even values issues like collaboration, liberty, equality, and these kinds of lofty goals. So I'm also, and just to close up, I'm interested in ways that we can use games. If games are devices for producing a subjectivity, then they can be different kinds of machines of this subjectivity. So they may be they may bring attention to materiality. They may bring attention to desire, or these stories like the Blast Theory project about really what, I was really amazed about the sense of many people brought up I am afraid. That is the theme of coming in there. I think that these kinds of themes are really amazing when you unleash a little bit of participant experience into the games. And how you do that, the methods, it's one of the things I'm working on. I have a project called Values at Play, and we actually make design tools to help incorporate human values into the design process. So I have card games, I have strange curriculum, readings, and all kinds of things to get people thinking about what kinds of decisions we put into our games in the first place. And that really determines how they're played. I also do a lot of stuff with doing Augusto Boal, Theodore the Oppressed, and doing this in game design classes. And that seems to be a way of trying to, again, bring the body back into that experience design and thinking about the political active nature of these of games. So I'll talk about this if you have a question. But yes.
Thank you so much. As we are running a little late and we still have quite a lot on the program, I would just allow one question from the audience. No question from the audience? Yeah.
So one of the things that a group of game designer friends and I, so I'm undoing this while we talk, it's a very useful time. A group of game designer friends and I have been talking a lot about how what we do in a game really matters, what kinds of activities we're doing. So I think that, for example, if we're playing together, if we're collaborating, if I have to rely on you, if I'm shooting things, but it's really for the social good, is that really, does the mechanic actually manifest the thing that you're trying to communicate? So you have to really reflect on if I'm going to observe something or if I'm going to record something, whatever action you're doing in this experience, somehow we have to tie this into the theme of the game itself, into the experience. And I think that there's something, it's really hard to do. And I think that there's a big popularity with game design right now, and it's great, and there's a lot of programs, but game design is far hard. I mean, my background's in film, and it was much easier to make movies, frankly. So and I'm excited about it, of course, and I've been doing game design for 15 years, but I would say that the trick to getting a good game that's fun and playable and interesting and engaging that also really deeply manifests the kinds of actions and themes that you really are trying to get a hold of is a place that I'm taking this McLuhan idea and really bringing it to the actions in the game. Thank you.
Thank you so much.